Oh boy, it's always those 2000s PC exclusive racing games that really get me going. Welcome to the Worst Racing Games, the internet series where you guys suggest different racing games that you think are terrible, then I play them, review them, and rank them. So last week we covered a racing game about one of the most irritating internet trends of the early 2000s, the Crazy Frog, and that was for the PS2, so this week the Worst Racing Games wheel has dubbed us with a PC exclusive racing game called Tricked and Tuned West Coast Streets. Not gonna lie, the abbreviated "and" in this game's title pretty much sums up everything you need to know about this game's quality. Now, before we actually get into the game, we have to talk a little bit about its history. So, Tricked and Tuned West Coast Streets released exclusively on Windows in 2006. Yes, 2006. What's a game we just looked at that came out a year before that on the 360? Project Gotham Racing 3. Yikes. I believe this was an exclusive release to the United States as well. It was developed by Canopy Games and was published by Brawn Media Services. Now, if you've never heard of either of those companies, don't worry, you are not alone, because I could barely find any information about these companies online, especially the publisher. Canopy Games apparently developed a few PC exclusive games in the early 2000s, ranging from Harley Davidson Race Around the World to I Was an Atomic Mutant. Again, I emphasize the apparently because there's such little information, I'm not sure how accurate it actually is. Anyway, so yeah, a developer with practically no credits and a publisher that pretty much no one's heard of, so this should be pretty good, right? Well, let's get into it. So before we get into the actual racing, I think we first have to take a look at this game's menu design, because that's the first impression you ever get of any game when you boot it up. Alright, so first of all we've got the Tricked and Tuned logo, which screams I'm really trying to be cool, but not quite achieving it. But in all seriousness, it's actually not that bad. It's definitely trying, it's definitely quite edgy, but it's very 2000s and I'll give it that charm. You've also got some drawings of some characters that literally have no relevance to the game whatsoever in the backgrounds. They're very GTA style, but it's not quite at that level of quality. Then moving on, when you get into the game, you've also got the car selection screen, where if I put myself in the center, you've got all these chassis around, which is pretty cool. None of them look particularly good, to be honest, but they're trying. It's certainly an interesting car selection screen. I've not really seen anything like that before, so that's pretty cool. I'll give credit where credit's due on that front. And then moving on over to the upgrade screen, which certainly has some interesting upgrade options to it. So we've got all your standards here. You can change the car's color, the bodywork, the tires, the engine, the fuel intake, the tires, and a few other little options like cup holders and things like that. And then we also have the option to buy your girlfriend, and then not only can you buy a girlfriend, you can upgrade her. Oh, wow, there you go, guys. There's the secret. You can buy a girlfriend. Honestly, I want to know what the strategy was on making this game, because it must have been a pretty bad one, and I know a thing or two about bad strategies because I'm wearing a Ferrari t-shirt. So you'll probably spend all of your time on this game, if you actually play it, on the single player game mode, and that is basically a campaign that sees you racing against rival gangs, progressing through their territory and earning money. Kinda like Need for Speed and Fast and Furious type stuff going on here. When I say Fast and Furious, I mean like the first two films and Tokyo Drift, nothing beyond that. Anyway, you get a choice of different chassis to choose from. They're all very basic looking at the beginning, and you can mod them and upgrade them as you progress. I couldn't really tell you what half of these cars are trying to be, but one of them is definitely the early 2000s Ford Focus. Each gang typically consists of 3 races and 1 trick-based event, which I'll get into a bit later. The first race is always a full mile race where you're against 2 or 3 other opponents. The opponents themselves are very easy, it's just actually keeping your car in control that's more of a problem. The second event is always the exact same layout, but it's half a mile instead, so the track you've just played finishes exactly halfway through. Then after that you get a trick-based event, where you earn score, I think, from getting airtime up ramps, but it doesn't really explain that to you. You get a time limit to do it in, and due to this game's wonky ass physics, it's actually quite challenging. And then the final of the 4 races of each gang is against the gang leader. It's a one-on-one race. The lengths of these races do vary, and some of them have some little challenges like traffic being there and stuff like that, but to be honest, it's very standard stuff. This game is very much so a game that was trying to ride the hype of the 2000s Need for Speed street racing craze, and you know, I don't blame them for trying, but I do blame them for doing an incredibly poor job at trying. Like, I know sometimes I kind of have to explain these intricacies in the games that annoy me, but I feel like in this, the gameplay just speaks for itself. It's just absolute dog water. Alright, so what are the controls actually like in this game? Well, the default controls are very standard for what you'd expect from a PC-exclusive 2000s racing game, where it's all mapped to the keyboard. So you've got W, A, S, and D to control the car, although you can substitute S for the spacebar as your brake. If you want to boost, you can press B, and if you have gear shifting set to manual, you can go up and down a gear with Q and E. Eventually, using the number keys, you can change your camera angle as well, but you do have to actually use in-game currency to unlock these options as upgrades. So the only car view you get at the start is the close-up third-person view. You can change to a bumper cam and a more zoomed-out third-person cam later, but you have to pay in-game money for it. I don't know, guys, that seems like a really stupid thing to lock behind a paywall. I know it's like not a real paywall, but imagine any other racing game locking a different camera angle behind progress and earning money. It's just so stupid. Anyway, the game does allow you to remap those controls if you so desire. I have no idea if it has controller support or not because I didn't even bother to try. I just kind of assumed it probably wouldn't. Now, the bigger question is, once you do have a grasp of the controls, how do the cars actually feel to drive? Well, not that great, to be honest with you. Cars do not feel good to drive. There's no satisfaction from the acceleration. You can steer pretty much on a dime on most corners, except if you're carrying immensely high speeds, but for the most part you barely have to brake, and then when you do brake, the brakes don't even really work that well anyway. When you decide to steer left or right, it's pretty much a coin flip as to whether it's going to feel really sensitive and over the top, or it will feel like you're trying to turn a cruise ship in ice. And as far as I can tell, there doesn't really seem to be an in-between to those two extremes. Something I did find a bit strange about this game was on these stunt sections, or whenever you pretty much get any airtime or hit something, the game stutters quite bad. Like if you do a jump and go to take off, there's like this brief moment where the game has to really think about whether or not it's going to crash or let you land the jump. But it can be really off-putting when you're trying to do those stunt runs, because that sudden lag might mean you do a misinput and land at an angle, or with your wheels facing in the wrong direction and you spin out. It's not really ideal, and I'm not entirely sure if it's just because it's an old game running on a modern Windows 10 PC, or if that was a genuine issue back when the game released as well. One issue that I definitely know is just down to the compatibility is the fact that the game crashes quite a lot, but that is just because it's a very old game that doesn't have any real HD support on a Windows 10 computer. I can't blame the game for it, but it doesn't change the fact it's really bloody annoying. Now, I'm sure the gameplay on screen does speak for itself, but let's just discuss the visuals anyway. Now, in my opinion, this game very much so looks like a early Team 6 Studios game in the worst way possible. All the textures are incredibly dull, the car models just aren't very good. They're not the worst I've ever seen, but they're still not great, and the entire world feels incredibly kind of dull and lifeless. I mean, on the plus side, they don't appear to have that horrible urine yellow filter that Team 6 games tend to have, but it still has the vibe and kind of textural look of those games. There's also a couple of character models in the game for people, as you'll get girls that start the races, and I can't say they look particularly good either. Not quite as blocky and cursed as I was expecting, but not great nonetheless. I mean, thankfully, the entire game is very dark, so it's actually hard to see a lot of these things. And normally that would be a big complaint, but I think this game being dark definitely works in its favour. so you don't have to see as much. But yeah, to me at least, this game looks like a very early, very budget PS2 racing game, like some of the shovelware we've seen in this series, except it's 2006 and it's on Windows. And if you thought the sound design was going to be the saving grace for this game, well, think again, because it definitely is not. The engine sounds are some of the most generic, repeated loops of engines I've ever heard in my entire life. None of the cars have any character to them whatsoever. Acceleration is the most boring thing on planet Earth, and that should not be something I'm saying about a racing game, especially a street racing game where it's kind of drag culture. There's basically no music. You can buy a stereo for your car as an upgrade, but even then, the music didn't play. I don't know if that's a bug or not, but as far as I can tell, this game has literally no music to it whatsoever. And for a street racing game, that's kind of surprising, because normally these things have pretty good soundtracks. But, I mean, if you really, for some reason want to play this game and you need music, just mute the game and play your own music so you don't have to listen to the boring sound effects as well. I think in terms of design, visuals, audio, all that stuff, I think the only nice thing that I can possibly say is something I already said earlier, is that the logo has a kind of 2000s cheese to it that I guess works in its favour. That is the nicest thing I can possibly say about any of the design side of this game. So in terms of critical response, I'm sure you can probably guess what I'm going to say next. There were pretty much no professional critical reviews for this game whatsoever. In fact, it was pretty hard to find literally any information about this game at all. It has a page on My Abandonware, which is where you can download it from, and a wiki page on a racing games wiki, but it has almost no information about it. Other than that, it has a Game FAQs page where somehow users have actually given it a score, so thank you to the few people that have actually played this game and gone out of their way to rank it on this website. So across 3 user ratings, it has a score of 3 out of 5 stars, or what Game FAQs call fair. The difficulty is also 3 out of 5 hearts and put as just right, and apparently the game takes 16 hours to complete, which is just absolute rubbish, because you can do this in like 2 hours. The only way I can see that taking 16 hours is if you get insanely unlucky with how much your game crashes and you keep forgetting to save and having to restart your progress. But otherwise, this is not a long game. There is only like 5 or 6 gangs and each one only has 4 events to it. How is that 16 hours worth of content? The longest race is like 50 seconds long. Alright, so now the time has come where we must rank Tricked and Tuned West Coast Streets on our worst racing games tier list. Now, a lot of the PC exclusive racing games that I've covered in this series, and don't get me wrong, there haven't been that many, all tend to have a certain level of charm to them. Final Drive Nitro definitely had a weird charm to it, European Street Racing did as well, although that game was not good. But this just seems void of really any personality or any redeeming features whatsoever. I mean, don't get me wrong, in my opinion it's definitely not bottom tier material, but it really is not a good game, and that cannot be overstated. This is definitely not a good game. So for me, I think Tricked and Tuned is going to be joining some other PC racing games like Road to Fame in hot garbage. It is just rubbish, it hasn't got the charm to it that's so bad that it's kind of good games do, and it's not so heinously evil that it's pure evil. So yeah, hot garbage is where Tricked and Tuned is going to be residing from this day forward. And so that takes us to the end of our look at Tricked and Tuned West Coast Streets. Wow, what a mouthful for such a boring game. So let me know in the comments down below, what do you guys think of this game? Have you played it? Did you play it growing up? And if you did, I'm kind of sorry for dogging on it. And as always, if you have any suggestions you want to see on the wheel, then let me know in the comments down below. Just a reminder, if you want to see the up-to-date tier list and the current suggestions on the wheel, head on over to my website, which is in the description below, as there's a worst racing games page on the site. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to leave a like, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe and tap that bell for notifications to stay up to date with my future uploads. A massive shout out to my Patreon subscribers for the continued support. You guys are the stuff of legend. and all I really have left to say is thank you and goodbye.